Good morning, everybody. It's Pastor John with another edition of Monday Morning Quarterback. So yesterday we continued our sermon series on the Advent Conspiracy. And remember, the Advent Conspiracy series is just a quick 3-week series meant to prepare us for the season of Advent. So if we follow these principles, we can keep a holy Advent and really, have a wonderful Christmas, quite honestly. And if you'd like to know more about the Advent Conspiracy, you could just go online to their website, adventconspiracy.org, and there's all kinds of information there. And the principles that I share in the sermons and that I also share on my Monday Morning Quarterback, you can get more information about those as well. It's an experience that I highly recommend. As I said before, when I began my career as a pastor, it didn't take long for me to sort of become bah humbug about the season of Advent, because there was just so much stuff, so much clutter. The calendar was over full. We were spending money on gifts, all kinds of madness that had nothing to do with the birth of Christ. And it was when I discovered the Advent Conspiracy, quite frankly, that I really took back both the season of Advent and the season of Christmas, and and they've become very meaningful experiences for me. So when I share with you these principles of the Advent Conspiracy, I want you to know these are not just theological principles that seem like a good idea. These are principles that I have incorporated into my own life, and it has made all the difference in the way that I experience the season of Advent and Christmas. So I highly recommend that you learn more about the Advent Conspiracy. Now, the principles this week, there were 2 principles. The first principle is spend less, and the second principle is give more. Now, those might seem contradictory at first, right? Spend less, but give more. Well, how can I give more if I'm spending less? So let's take them one at a time. The first principle, spend less. Basically what they're saying is, this is not the malls or Amazon.coms or the store's story to tell, okay? Commerce is not how we give praise. Commerce is not what Christmas is about. And spending less is just that spiritual discipline that says, during this season, think about what you're doing. Actually be mindful about what you're doing in order to prepare yourself for the birth of Christ. The scripture that we read in the sermon yesterday was Matthew 6:19 through 21. And that's where he talks about not storing for yourself treasures on earth, but store up for yourself treasures in heaven. And at the end of it, Jesus says, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And spending less is just a conscious reminder of where our treasure really is. And so that's why we spend less. And then from that, we transition into the give more principle. And the give more principle does not mean buy more. It means give more. So give more of ourselves in the gifts that we do give. Give more love, give more thought, give gifts that don't necessarily require money, but require time. When I began the Advent Conspiracy many years ago, and I shared this in my sermon yesterday, when I started doing the Advent Conspiracy, one of the things that my wife and I did is we started giving one another experiences for Christmas. So even though there was some, money involved, like if it was tickets for something, but it was an experience. So we were making a memory, But the real thing that started with the Advent Conspiracy is I have a lot of nephews because my wife and I both have large families. And, buying for all the extended family just became so overwhelming. It really did. So for my nephews on my wife's side of the family, the day after Christmas, December 26th, for the last 12 years, I have taken them for a hike. I choose the hike. I take them to lunch after the hike, and if there's a souvenir shop at the park where we are, like a national park or something, then I get them a small souvenir at that souvenir shop. But we've had this experience now every year for the last 12 years, and the tradition is continuing. And these, they were boys when we started. Now these are grown men with jobs and their own apartments, their own houses, and all that stuff. It's not, but they still haven't grown out of this tradition. It's something they look forward to. It's certainly something I look forward to, but it's the gift of an experience. It's the gift of time. It's the gift of relationship. That's what giving more means. And so I encourage you to think of ways that you can do that this Advent season. What are ways you can spend less but give more? If you can do those things, I promise you will have a richer, more meaningful Advent and Christmas. I've read this poem before. It's one of my favorite poems. I've read this poem before on the Monday Morning Quarterback, but I want to share it again. It's a poem called On the Mystery of the Incarnation by Denise Levertov. She writes, "It's when we face for a moment the worst our kind can do, and shudder to know the taint in our own selves, that awe cracks the mind's shell and enters the heart. Not to a flower, not to a dolphin, to no innocent form, but to this creature, vainly sure it and no other is godlike. God, out of compassion for our ugly failure to evolve, entrusts as guests, as brother, the Word." That's a beautiful poem. How can we celebrate that truth, that God entrusted himself as our guest, as our brother? How can we celebrate that? We don't celebrate that with a sale. We don't celebrate that by spending money we don't have for things we don't need. We celebrate that by spending less, but giving more. Because by doing so, we are more attuned to what God is actually up to during Advent and Christmas. Have a wonderful week, my friends. God bless.